Devin Collins is a passionate and dedicated drummer whose journey with music began early and has been unwavering ever since. From discovering his love for drumming at the age of 12 to graduating Magna Cum Laude from Berklee College of Music, Devin's always been driven by his commitment to creating meaningful and impactful music. Whether performing on stages across the Midwest, Northeast, and beyond, or teaching and inspiring students, Devin brings a unique blend of skill, heart, and professionalism to every project. Based in Brooklyn, New York, he's a sought after performer, producer, and drum instructor who I'm ready to reconnect with. So, Devin, my friend, good to see you.
Good to see you, brother. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. 20 years we met at the Berklee College of Music, fall of 2005, and much has happened ever since.
I can't believe it's been that long because I think back, like I'll run into people because I still see so many people that we were in school with and work with a bunch of them, and we'll have that realization that it's like, wow, we met 19 years ago, or we started a band 15 years ago. It just doesn't seem like time has been able to go that long. It's crazy.
Yeah, and thinking back to it now, I remember we met during the orientation week going for pizza at Crazy Doughs and stuff. And then I got to see you going on to do a lot of really cool things, even as a student, working with Sal DeFusco. I remember that was really, really great for you. And then I
That
remember you
was
were
fun.
playing with Dave Cavalier and stuff. So, even back then, we're talking about in the early 2000s, I guess. You were being sought after. Everyone knew you were had extraordinary abilities on the instrument, but were also a great guy to play with and hang out with and stuff. Now we're 20 years later. So kind of walk me through like what's been going on the last year, let's say, and catch me up a little bit.
Well, yeah, so last year, one of the most notable things of the last year was like somehow I've ended up getting invited into the theater world, which I never thought I would ever be a part of. I never considered playing in like Times Square Theater District and those theaters would be a thing. But way back in 2018, I got connected to the percussionist at Hamilton, and I've been subbing there ever since 2019. I actually played there last night. And then in September or October, about a year ago, my buddy Andrew Atkinson, who's an
Oh yeah, I know him. Yeah.
yeah. So Andrew has got the chair at the Michael Jackson show on Broadway, and he like called me out of the blue. And I'd actually played at Hamilton that night, and I was like on the train. It was like 11 at night, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm on the train. Like, it's like can I call you?" And he's like, "Call me when you get up above ground." And so I called him, and we just were talking. And then he goes, "Hey, I have this show, and I thought you might be a good fit for it. Wanted to see if you wanted to come and hang." So towards the end of October last year, I started subbing at MJ, and I've been subbing there on and off throughout the year. Um, I've been working a bunch with a guy named Elliot Moss, and he's kind of had a rough road where we just every time it was like starting to really go, there was like some kind of a a bump in the road. There was like some management stuff early on, and then we like had done a tour in 2020, like US and Canada, and then like had the whole like the next 6 months was like booked with like Europe and all sorts of other stuff. And then the pandemic hit and that was like game over. But we did a run, I think it was late April into May, for like 3 weeks this year. And then we got to go down to Mexico. And Evan Marion's been a part of that band for forever. So it's been Evan and I and Elliot trio. So yeah, it was some touring stuff, some in and out of town. And then, it's been interesting because now it's like I have these two shows on Broadway that I get to sub on. The Hamilton tours have had me out. So I've gone out for like 2 weeks at a time to do some of the coverage of tours when one of them needs a break. And then there's just a bunch of like local in-town artists that I've been helping either music direct or put tracks together and put shows together. Um, and that's been a whole interesting thing. Like if you remember Josh Hari, he's had me come in and help put together the tracks for this amazing artist Amber Mark,
Bass player,
and
right?
yeah, he's bass player, music
Yeah.
director, and so her live band right now was Randy did some of it on guitar, Randy Runyon, and then but Tim Smith has been doing drums recently with Josh on bass, an amazing keyboard player named Devin Yesberger, and then Corey Sanchez has done a good chunk of stuff. If you know Corey, because he was a little bit after us in school, but
I don't know Corey, but I know Josh. We played, a couple sessions
yeah.
at Berkeley and stuff. So
So it's been some of that. I somehow fell into like people finding out that I could put together tracks and run Ableton and play drums and do all that. And sometimes I'm getting hired to run tracks and put that stuff together, or I'll just get hired to put the stuff together for other projects.
Well, as you're
Um,
talking about this, I love that, because some people would say, okay, I got to sub on Broadway, like I've hit the top level of what you can do in this business because it is Broadway and there's such a people really respect it and know that it's top quality. But at the same time, you're playing with all these other artists and doing all these different projects. You have a musical appetite you need to fulfill.
I mean, I've been really fortunate because I feel like I do everything wrong. Like I was thinking about this earlier, and I was like, man, I need to be a better student. I feel like I'm a terrible student of music, and in the sense where I've been fortunate enough that I started playing a bunch, and then if you're working with a bunch of different artists, people are like, oh, what are you listening to? And it's like my literal Spotify Wrapped was like one-off gigs that I did where I had to like learn an artist's record in less than a week, and I just like overdosed listening to it. And it's like your number one artist of the year is the guy that I played one gig with in August, and I sent him the photo and we had a laugh about it. Um, but so a lot of what I get to listen to and a lot of where my focus is on what I'm learning is all the stuff that I'm is being brought to me through referrals and people inviting me onto the gig. But then I feel like, as a result of that, I lose sight of, in a sense, you can almost lose sight of your own voice of what is it that I wanted to bring, what is it that I want to do within music, because I'm working and that's wonderful. But there's another part of me that feels like, I still have growth and I still have, there's things that I hear that I want to be able to bring forward that I can't physically play. And I just need to have more time to be able to sit and just like be at my instrument. And I'm starting to feel that pull of like, man, I got to get to a shed. I got to go sit down and just like have some free time to just be with my instrument again, because sometimes that can get lost. But
We're
yeah,
also
I
we're also
feel,
much older
okay.
now too. I mean, like when I was at Berklee, I didn't leave. Like I just practiced all day in my apartment, basically. And now, life and bills and all
Now there's bills.
that.
They don't stop. This is the time of year where I start holding my phone up to the ceiling and I'm like, money, and I just hope that the phone will ring. But yeah, I've been really fortunate. I think that I do like I get at, you if you meet people that aren't playing for a living or people that aren't music, they'll, oh, what's your favorite music to play? And I'm like, man, that's just, I can't even answer that question today because I've been brought and I've been exposed to all this beautiful music that is all different types of genres and just from everywhere. And I really love a good song and I love playing with a great band. And I've been fortunate enough that I love improvising and
Yeah, you're an
stretching out.
improviser too. Let's not forget that. That's a huge part of it.
And, and I mean, I got to play. Do you ever know Aki Ishiguro?
Yeah,
He
I
was,
actually emailed him, believe it or not.
so
I know
Aki just,
he's in Japan, but we're trying
they
to set something up.
Yeah, so I didn't realize he was moving, but we played his CD release show was like the night or 2 days before he moved to Tokyo. But like he had Martha Cato on keys, he had our buddy Jim on bass. I'm spacing on Jim's last name. Takuya Kuroda on trumpet, and it was just so much fun. We got to stretch out. Keita Ogawa was on percussion. I
Oh
mean, it was
wow.
like, dude, we were just like getting to show up and play New Blue and do like two sets going through the record and some other stuff that we'd recorded. And we really got to like play and stretch out. And to me, that's like I need that.
Well,
When I
it's
first
funny you
got to New
mentioned it
York.
because it's funny you mentioned because orientation week at Berkeley, like I went to this concert at the Middle East and like he was playing with Ian Rapine and and it's like
Yeah.
these guys are still very much even even back then they were amazing and now they're 20 years later, 2 decades later, they're still doing it and that's why I reach out and like because I remember certain people like
Oh
yourself.
yeah. I mean, I got to play in that band too with Ian. Like I came to New York, I went and saw them play at 55 Bar. And I was like, hey man, if you ever need drums, we ended up having like a session in Flatbush on like a weekly session for a while. And it was like Aki, Ian, we'd get Justin Stanton on keys a bunch, and then Alex Smith played bass for a bunch of it, if you remember Busby. Um, but yeah, I mean, we used to have that session and we'd do like 55 bar hits with Ian's music, which was like crazy. I mean, that was, I got to New York and I ended up playing with him and Felix Pastorius a bunch early on. And it was like, I had that opportunity where we were
Yeah,
stretching out.
you've played at some of the best venues in the world. In New York, they are some of the best venues in the world.
And now,
And the
now
50,
closed.
yeah, well, yeah, 55 bar is closed, but and you're playing the Broadway shows and you've toured the world, but I think we're around the same age. I'm 37, you're
Yeah,
right.
37. I'll be
Yeah,
38
yeah.
in February. So,
Yeah, we started at the same time right out of high school. So, like, we still, and so much is in 20 years, like, but tell me, what do you still want to do? What's like, if you could, in the next 10 years, if you could do a couple of different things, what would you want to do, you think?
I mean, I've always had the aspirations of like I love touring and I've been fortunate enough to do some touring, never as the headliner, but I've had a couple of opportunities where I've been a part of like the direct support to a tour that's doing like 1,500 to 3,000 cap theaters, and that's been in Europe, in the US and Canada. So like in with Elliot, my buddy that I was talking about, we did a tour in 2016, I want to say, opening up, or 2015, opening up for the Cold War Kids. I was like Terminal 5 in New York and like, some like large venues. And I really enjoy playing in those big spaces and I really enjoy putting together a show. There's something that aside from being the improviser, there's another part of me that loves working with an artist to like getting into some pre-production, like if we're putting tracks together, like let's get to the nitty-gritty, like if you need me to get electronics and samples, let's chop all that stuff out, like let's put a show together. So I would love to be able to have one or two projects that was able to really put together a show and then we could go tour and it'd be fun to have some larger rooms. Like I've gotten to play in some small stadiums, never like the 20,000 person stadium, and it's so much fun to be able to just like
You
hit
got to get Bruce
hard.
Springsteen. You got to get Bruce Springsteen's email.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, I enjoy like there's a freedom in that because like I grew up like hitting super hard. I grew up with like two massive clip speakers like blasting the Mars Volta Delouse in the Comatorium and just like learning that note record for or that record note for note as like a sophomore in high school. And and so then I got to Berklee and it's like, oh, there's this whole other like discipline of how to really play and how to understand having control over your instrument and getting this great sound. And you're playing in small clubs if you're going to play. I mean, unless you're at like a big festival, like, most of the time, if I'm playing something that's a lot of improvising today, it's going to be at like New Blue is maybe the largest venue. I mean, 55 bar was like 60 people max in this little sliver of a hallway of a bar. And and so you have to be able to learn how do I get a good sound and a big sound, but not blow a room out in a small space on drums. I don't just have the volume knob. You have to actually like get in there and figure out how to have that touch. But there's something the opposite of that is to sit in a stadium and it's like I can literally just go for broke.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
but you know what though? I think aren't they both satisfying?
well, I will say that like getting to play the 55, it's so sad to me that that's closed. I was there like a week after they closed and the bar was gone. Apparently Scott, the owner, took the bar. I just found that out from Oz Noy. I ran into Oz on Monday at Producer Mondays at New Blue, and Oz Noy said that Scott, the owner of the 55 bar, actually took the bar out of the thing and like has the bar
Please tell
somewhere.
Oz I want to interview him if you speak to him.
I have some people that are closer friends with him. I love Oz and I love his playing, and we used to see each other a bunch when I was playing with Felix back at the 55, like on a regular basis. But then we hadn't seen each other for a bunch of years, so I'd like see him on the train and like try to give him the nod, and I was like, he clearly has no idea who I am. But I remember Terry Lynn Carrington had that. I was talking to her about somebody when we were at school, and she just looked at me flat out and was like, I don't know who you're talking about. So I'm like, you're going to do the thing with him. And she's like, I don't know. I'm just here because this guy asked me to be here. And I just said something like, you've got to know who he is, and tried to describe this guy. And she just looked at me and she goes, do you have any idea how many people I meet? And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, and I get that today. I didn't understand that at,
Devin,
19
this
years
is the
old.
funniest thing. Like one time, like I did a gig with somebody and like it was so unenjoyable. And like that I'm like, I never want to like don't want to work with this person. we're just not compatible personally and musically. But then
That's
like
tough.
I
Yeah.
needed to get a person who played their instrument, and like I totally forgot about this horrible gig that I swore I would never speak to this. And and then we met face to face, I'm like, oh yeah, we played together, you know? But it was like this was such a specific moment that I totally forgot about it, you know? I'm not
It,
lying to you.
yeah. No, I believe it. I struggle today because I just feel like the RAM is at max capacity where there's
Yeah.
been times where people will come up to me and they clearly know who I am. And like, this is just like, I'd forget, and I can't remember. And it's like, it'll happen with like my buddy in the band's partner. And I've met her probably a bunch of times. And for whatever reason, I'm like, the context of who they are and where we are, and I can't put it together in the moment. And then
Well, I'm
I'm
glad
just
you
like,
remember me, you know? So it's good.
oh, come on.
Do you still
But
talk to
so,
Ryan? Are you still friends with Ryan Broderick?
oh yeah, I mean we've been trying. So Ryan's got like two kids and has been really helping put together. He helped put together like a creative, basically a place of like creative spaces. So
I
like
saw that
rehearsal
online. Yeah.
studios. Yeah, so they got that going. And in the pandemic, he got into a trade. I can't remember what kind of trade. It's like something that he got into something because it was just necessity for us, a lot of us to get. I mean, he had family, so he's like, I got to make some money here. Um, and they've kind of started offering him some other stuff. So I know he was teaching a bunch and he was playing, a bunch, but then, this thing in the pandemic kind of showed up and it became like, hey, this is how I can support my family in the most economical way. But we've been dancing around like, hey, my wife and I want to take a drive out and go hang with him and his wife Kiara and hang with the kids and stuff. But it's trying
Well, I
to
remember
balance
you guys were
schedules.
buddies too. You guys were buddies at
Yeah.
Berklee. So,
Well, there was a band at one point where I had like an APC and was like launching live samples that we would chop from like Randy's Boomerang. And then I had like a floor tom and a low, deep snare. And I would like dance around and just do auxiliary stuff while he played drums. It was great. I love that. I'm like super down. Part of me wonders if I was supposed to be a percussionist because like the way I think about rhythm and time is all the inside the group, like inside the grid. And it's like, well, a lot of times drums need to be like, we need to be the backbone of some stuff. Even if it's improvising, I still need to have that. And I'm like, my brain just wants to go into like the inside the grid stuff. I'm like, maybe I was
you
supposed to be a percussionist.
well, but I always feel like when I meet somebody, like even when I was younger, I mean, I feel like I am kind of intuitive. Like when I meet them, like I'm like, yeah, they're gonna still be doing music later in life. They just have there's just the passion there. And I remember like you clearly had it. Like I was right. And but you talked a little bit. I was kind of curious. You Even when you went to Berklee, you were like, okay, I need to like learn how to play a little quieter and stuff because of my upbringing. But now looking back on like all the experiences you've had, if you could give advice to your younger self, what do you think you would tell the younger Devin?
I think the thing that I would say is learn how to translate what you're hearing on keyboard or guitar or another instrument. It was the one thing that I didn't do was I got so pinholed into like I just wanted to play drums and I had these kind of visions of like, hearing like at 19 finding Mark Juliana and some of the stuff he was doing and some of these guys that were starting to like it felt like have a new voice in the world of drumming. Guys like Jamire Williams and I mean Mark was doing a bunch, and we had at school like Justin Tyson and some of the cats that are now like just all over the
Do you
like.
remember? Do you remember? I remember. My memory is like it's kind of scary. But if you remember this, that'll be something else. We were watching a video. I don't know where we were. We were watching a video of Kenny Garrett playing, and Jamire Williams was on drums. Do you remember this or no?
Was it with Glasper? Because there was a whole
No, no,
thing
no, no.
where
We were
okay,
watching a video of you were showing me a video of Dana Hawkins playing drums with Jeremy Pelt, and
oh
then
yeah, yeah,
but then
yeah,
I was showed you a video of Jamire Williams playing with Kenny Garrett, and you were it's so funny you
dude.
mentioned it now. It's like full circle, you know.
I mean those. So Dana. Justin Tyson. I mean, there was a whole bunch of dudes at Berklee, but I just remember like, I had these ideas at some point that I was gonna, I'm gonna be one of the new voices, or what? It's like you have this ego where you're like, I got to go do this thing and become somebody, and I think that got in the way of me sitting down and saying, hey, like I'm hearing all this harmony and all these changes, and I really like I want to be able to put this down on another instrument and be able to write. And that's something that I feel like I just have a lot of. I'll struggle if I sit down to try to write. It's just going to take me a minute. I'm not going to be able to just instantly find what I'm hearing. It's like I'm going to have to sit there and kind of get frustrated, and then again, man, I'm a terrible student. The whole
That's
go
just your
go
journey,
beat
though. That's
yourself up. Exactly. But so I
your
think if I could go back in time, and what I would suggest to anybody, it's like in today's world, we need to be able to do everything. Like you need to be able to record and produce and write and lead and have all those skills. I think if you want to make a living and as a performer or as an artist, like, and you also then have to do stuff like this. You have to have the marketing chops to run the Instagram pages and do all the, like, there's just so many other skills than just play an instrument. And I think I had this romanticized idea of like the 60s or 70s where you could just play the instrument, and today's world's just so different. And I think that to anybody it's like, always have the thing that's your love, but like make sure you're picking up, make sure you're participating and picking up other instruments, and that you're able to like sit down and make music on multiple things and familiarize yourself with how to record and produce yourself, and be able to give usable deliverable tracks to people so you can record and get paid at home, so that you can be putting demos together, music directing, writing charts if you need to for an artist to put a band together. Like all those skills are will allow the landscape of being a professional musician to just make your life, you're more accessible to more flows of income. And I think that that would have been, if I was at school and was sitting in harmony and ear training classes and going back and putting all that stuff on a piano, I think that would have instantly, that would be a game changer to today, because there's stuff that I hear. I'm like, I want to write, like there's a part of me that just wants to write an entire like liquid funk drum and bass record, but not in the sense of I want to put out that music. It's like I want to write all the stuff and then like figure out how to trigger that and do like the show live where I'm actually playing, that
okay.
stuff. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'll feel handicapped in the writing process with some of those ideas that I'll come across. I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to just take me a while to put all this stuff down and actually get into the production of it. But
It's
but yeah,
interesting
that would
what
be
you're
my
saying.
thing.
But
Diversify.
you're talking about like all the things we have to do to be successful and make a living, as a professional musician. And you're giving, this podcast we can say is going to be, you're saying some things that'll be valuable to people listening to it. Who do you owe like the most credit to in terms of any mentors or teachers or artists you got to work with that really just made some, like, I feel like things happen in our lives that like we're like looking here, but now forever we're looking this way. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, yeah, so I'll say there was I ended up in the suburbs of Chicago, and shout out to the family because they didn't just find a house they liked and said we're living here, but part of their considerations was looking at the school systems and what was going on, and where we ended up moving from Indianapolis to the suburbs of Chicago was a school district that happened to have a really happening arts program. And so the band director that I had in high school was a guy named Scott Casagrande, and he went on to get all sorts of awards like nationally and be recognized for everything he was doing. And there was a drum instructor that was his friend who he would like invite to help with a lot of the percussion stuff. There's a guy named Jerry Steinhilber who's out in Washington State now and still playing. And he was at Berklee like when Levano was there
Oh
in
wow.
like the like early 80s. And so he
Yeah.
was hanging with Garzone and the Fringe, and like came to Chicago and was like one of the guys that was playing in all the jazz clubs around Chicago. And so I had a band director that really cared, and I had an instructor for private lessons all through those high school years. That, I mean, that was, I think, the beginning foundation. And some of the other students there were helpful, like our buddy Ryan. the Jacoby family, Ryan, Sean, and Kevin. Ryan was 2 years older than me, ended up going to North Texas and being in the jazz program at North Texas. Sean ended up, I think, also going to North Texas. And then Kevin went to SUNY Purchase. But, there was like a super musical family. Their dad was a music instructor. And, they had the Jacoby family band. And they were just like light years beyond me as far as like, swinging. And so I came in and was able to like understudy watching Ryan for an entire year in the jazz band in my high school and get to really pick all that stuff up and then having private. So that whole like foundation was great. Coming to Berklee, I think Mitch Hopper is, as far as an instructor, I met Randy Runyon in 2006 in his improv concepts workshop. And that whole workshop was like the opposite of playing over changes and improvising. It was like sitting with a random collection of small people, like 3 to 5 of us. And he would say, like, we're going to play 3 to 5 minutes. There's three of you. I want you to each play like a minute to a minute and a half and maybe leave a lot of space. And the whole thing was about how do you communicate with your instrument. And he talked a lot about, he would get like a female voice, electric guitar, and drums. And he'd be like, if you can't hear what she's saying, and she's an unmiked vocalist, then you're too loud. And it was all this stuff that, he was trying to break our habits. Don't play time. Don't play more than an interval. If you can play chords, like figure out how to, as a group, compose something together or think about how to communicate and leave space for each other and play with your ear and your heart and just create something.
Yeah.
And so that was a year-long class. And I feel like the lessons that I learned with Mitch as an instructor there have been applicable to every single musical situation I've ever been in ever since. And then I think that also opens the door for, I mean, I think Randy Runyon is a we've had a band together called the Karma Exchange for 15 years. And we've worked together with a bunch of other artists. We have a couple of projects now where we're playing, and he's a contributing writer with this one. And his songwriting, his playing, his vocabulary, like all that stuff was so influential on me. And I mean, he brought, with the first record that we put together right after school in 2009, um, was the opportunity to sit with someone and just really write and arrange a bunch of music and go to a studio and do that. And, I think he's just such a prolific writer. And he really has some amazing, it's like he writes music that I feel like in my heart I was born to play.
In your
And
your
so getting
bandmates,
to,
your bandmates, but he's an influence as well on a lot of
oh
music.
yeah. I mean that, so then coming to New York and getting to play with Felix Pastorius in that band, I mean, that was a huge influence on how, I mean, I'm sitting there with this dude who's playing like a 5 minute bass solo and you're not bored, but it's like, man, to learn how to play underneath that like long extended form soloing and be able to learn how to build that and how to like create that, like that was a huge learning experience. And I think that's been the thing, like, getting to meet and play with peers in school that were what felt like to me were way beyond me. It was a super big influence. And then getting to come here and and get a chance to then meet a bunch of people in New York. It's I think a lot of times it's been the peer group that has been the biggest influence. And then I'll give a shout out to like my buddy Jordan Perlson, who I took some lessons with a bunch of years ago, and he just really helped with some hand stuff and gave me some warm ups that have I continue to use that were super helpful. Um, but yeah, I think Randy, as far as one of the people I've played the most music with, has had a huge influence on just how I approach song form and playing. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, there's just so many. I mean, my friend Jean Rowe, getting to go on some tours with Jean. She's like this incredible, kind of like Joni Mitchell vibes, like folk Americana with some really great, you know, writing and storytelling, kind of like Bob Dylan vibes. And I don't know, she's just incredible. She's got some independent songwriter awards, and I think she got album of the year for the record Sisterly that we were touring. And I've gotten to play with a bunch of the Snarky Puppy crew, and it's like people that are just, you get to play with some homies, and you're like, man, you are really incredible at music. And for me, the best thing is getting to work with people that you have that respect for. Because when that respect is there, my ear, and it's stupid because you should respect everybody because it's not a competition here. But when there's people that speak to me and they really pull my ear in, those are the moments where you get to really make music, where you can tell everyone's really listening to each other and we're all really present in this moment. And then what happens is usually beyond what I feel like I'm actually capable of because there something is bigger than us is happening and we all seem to be tapped into it and then my body will do things that I didn't know it could do.
Yeah. The
And
music, the
and
music just pulls you in.
yeah, and so having the privilege to work with people to get into those spaces, I think those have been the biggest influences because it's like it's less about let me come and figure out technically what I want to play and let me like work on some stuff so I can go to the gig and play the cool things I worked on. And it's more like, can we get together? Can we serve the moment and serve each other and serve the music? And then if you're in that space with a group of people and you get lucky enough to do that repeatedly,
Yeah.
you will end up transforming as a player in ways you never knew because those people will show you what's possible.
No, Devin, this is like, it's beautiful stuff to hear you talk about this, and you really truly deserve everything that you've done. And I'm sure it's just the beginning in a lot of different ways. Where can everyone find you, like social media and all that stuff, or if they want to reach out? What's the best way?
Well, so I do have an Instagram. It's just Devin P. Collins. I didn't know I was supposed to do like a cool handle or anything when I signed up all those years ago. So it's just my name. I'm pretty bad at publicly posting. If anything, I've been posting more painting than music stuff over the last couple of years because I've just been having fun sitting here and painting or trying to paint. Um, but yeah, Devin P. Collins, that goes to my phone. If you reach out and want to say, hey, you can easily, I'm reachable. You can just hit me a message and I'll try to always at least look at what's going on in there. And um, but yeah, I mean, it's like I live in New York. I'm in
Yeah,
Brooklyn. I'm having
you can
fun
you can
playing music.
find Devin very easily.